So I tweeted a few days ago 4 questions, and I'm going to do a video on each type of question. So in this video, we're going to start off with the first one, which is ask me any questions. I'm going to go through the thread, and if you ask a question, I'm going to do my best to share my thoughts on that. And I'll have future videos coming out on all the other areas, reviewing your Twitter profile, your GitHub profile, and your open source projects. So don't forget to subscribe to get notified about those videos. So let's scroll down and see. We're going to skip the ones that aren't questions today, so we are going to do the AMA stuff. So we'll skip these, we'll come back to those in another video. So this one, here we go, our first question, Priyanka, thank you so much for this question. How to promote open source software to universities? That's a really good question. They're probably using open source already, so it might be easier than you think, but you need to start that conversation and see where their views lie. So for example, if they don't know what open source is, we need to start right at the beginning. But if they know what open source is, but think maybe it's not secure or it's out of date, then you could explain to them and demonstrate to them how, that's so not true. Or maybe they just don't know how to use it, how to keep it updated, or maybe they want to use open source, but the paid service of it, so someone maintains it and all the rest, like, the paid support. And that's also an option as well. So I really think you need to find out what stage they're at and then show them the benefits. Because again, if people are using open source and people are contributing to open source, there's so many benefits. People will communicate and collaborate so much better together. They can get community support, they can grow their network, they can learn a lot of technical skills, and they can also learn a lot of communication, the soft skills that are actually really hard. So I don't like using that word, the core skills, let's call it those. So I hope that helps. Keep me posted and let me know how that goes. Here's another question from Yudkash. How to contribute to Web3 in open source? Well, it's going to be the same. Open source is a really good foundation. There are just so many different projects to contribute to, but they all follow the same principles. Check out the contributing guide. What suggestions do they have there? Look at their issues. Do they have any good first issues? Look at their closed pull requests. Yes, you heard me correctly. Closed pull requests, and see why they got closed. Did the maintainer say, no, thank you, really liked it, but not for our project, please look at our open issues? Or did the maintainer just close it and not give any answer? Then you probably don't want to waste your time and contribute to those projects. So see the vibe of the project, see how people are talking and chatting. I think that is really, really important. Well, that's quite a good open source project, actually. Maybe we could create a project that checks the vibe of the project using sentiment analysis. Ooh. So if you're into ML, then let us know. That could be an interesting small project. We could do it as a GitHub action or something. Okay, you got me thinking now, but I need to focus on Link3 at the moment, but maybe that's something we can work on together. But yes, it's the same as any other project, and also follow people who are in the Web3 space like Francesco. They'll mention what projects are really active and inclusive and supportive, and that's a great way. So day one, contribute to any project, just get started. You will meet so many people and you'll learn so much more about open source and the workflows because the principles are mostly the same from project to project. I hope that helps. Thank you so much for the question. Thank you, Hacksoft, for this question. What are the top 3 most important principles for you when it comes to software development? Well, to be honest, the most important is communication. If someone can't communicate, they could be the best coder in the world, but if they can't talk to other people, we're rarely a one-person team. You're usually working with other developers, designers, project managers, testers, like a whole load of people, maybe even the client. But the important thing is that people know how to communicate, because things can get lost in translation, not literally just speaking a different language, could be speaking the same language, but I use that kind of term loosely, but doing things asynchronous, right? If someone's in different time zones and they're doing short messages here and there, it can kind of get lost. It might seem abrupt or rude, but they don't mean it in that way. So I think people need to practice communication and realize that writing maybe a few extra words, spending 10 more seconds on it, maybe even rereading it, you can make it a lot more friendlier. People won't get kind of a bit upset because they think you're being rude to them. So I think communication is definitely number 1. And 2, time. I mean, there's nothing wrong with jumping on a call and having a one-to-one with someone or group discussion, but is that always needed? And vice versa. Doing asynchronous communication is amazing. It's really changed how we work. I mean, a lot of us have been doing it for years, but now more people are on board. It's amazing. But sometimes jumping on a call just makes it easier. But the important thing is to realize when to do which one, like what is more effective for people's time, right? Time is something we'll never get back. No matter how many stars on your open source project you get, no matter how much money you make, you're never going to get time back. So it's important to value our time and make sure we take rests and so forth. So I think it's important that we make sure we value and respect other people's time. And that's just such an important skill to have. Number 3, I think it is finding a balance between best practices and speed, because best practices are super important. We might go slower on day 1, but I'm definitely going to go faster on day 2, 3, 4, and 5. So rather than keep getting slower and slower and slower, you get faster and faster and faster. And a lot of people don't look that far ahead, right? They're just looking at today. And I know Agile sometimes teaches us that, but it's a balance. And I think that comes from experience. For example, automated testing is such an important thing to have. It gives you confidence in your work. But some people go too far and try and check like every little thing. And other people don't check enough. They don't check the boundary conditions and so forth. So I think it's important to find that balance. And it depends on the project, depends on the team. But I think it is really important to make sure quality is set at a certain standard. And we're always trying to improve that quality by 1% each day, each sprint, or whatever it is. I think that's important, because a lot of people go the opposite way and they say, oh, we've got like 79% code coverage, we'll just drop it to 75 for this week. But then it becomes 70 and it becomes 40. Oh, they're failing tests, we need to get this deployed. Let's just turn off the tests. And it just goes from bad to worse. And I think that's the wrong way. You definitely need to go from good to better and better and best. But it takes time. So here's another question from DevTech. Can I join open source? There are so many ways you can join open source. I highly recommend joining a community. I think that will help you find some really supportive and inclusive projects. And also you'll discover projects of the other people in the community, which is just amazing. You're never going to be sure of projects, but it's good to just get started, because it's quite scary to get started. So I recommend getting started, and then you'll just discover so many more projects and so many more people, and just doors will just keep opening. And we've got so many amazing people in GitHub, but also there are other communities that you could join too. I would just join a few and see which one, look good and go at the speed that you want, because some are quieter, some are really noisy. You want to find one that you're happy with for now, and that could change later, and that's absolutely fine. So Jay's asked a really good question. How to learn any technology effectively and fast? For example, I want to become a web developer, but there's so many things to learn, and in a few months I'm learning front end only. Well, I think anything in tech, you just want to get on to real experience. Like you might start off on the first few days watching tutorials and reading blog posts, but you've got to get your hands typing, you've got to make mistakes, and that's the only way to learn, right? If you watch a tutorial on how to ride a bike, then it's only going to take you so far. They're going to say turn the pedals and the steering wheel, and when you're going fast, don't turn the steering wheel, handlebars, and lean a little bit more. So it's great to get that basic understanding, but you're only going to be able to ride a bike by doing it. So I recommend, you kind of guessed it, getting into open source, because then you can get real world experience, and people are there to help. They want to help. They want you to contribute to their projects. Not every project, but 95%, let's say. That's why I always say check the issues and the closed issues and closed pull requests, because you can see how the conversation goes and see if everyone's super friendly and supportive. There's nothing wrong with an issue or pull request being closed, but was it closed in a friendly and supportive way? So yeah, get real world experience in open source. So hopefully we'll see you in GitHub. Here's a question from Chrissy. How can I create more concise yet engaging tweets? I tend to detail when I write, so it's been difficult getting my message across without going over the limit. That's quite hard, you're right. I schedule my tweets ahead of time, so therefore I can go back and review them the next day, and that gives me lots more ideas on how I can restructure it. Do I do part of it in a reply? Does it turn into a thread? Does it not? Or do I split it? Instead of doing a thread, can each one become its own tweet, like 1 or 2 sentences, and therefore I get kind of 5 tweets out of a single thread if it was 5 replies? You get what I mean? So I think it's just practice, and look at how other people are doing it. I don't think you should use too many abbreviations, because it does make it more difficult for people to understand. So someone like myself, I don't understand a lot of abbreviations, but also someone whose English isn't the first language also might not understand it. So I think it's really important. I think practice, maybe get some feedback in a community. There are some great communities out there that focus on content creation. You could say, hey, this is the tweet I want to do, but it's a bit too long. Any suggestions on how to shorten it? And after you've done that a few times, you're going to learn your own way. So it's great to get some feedback and then get into your own flow. I think that's really important. So let me know how that goes, Chrissy. Nishit asks, how can I automate GitHub repository creation using a workflow? So you want to create a repo by automating it. So GitHub action needs to run in a repository. I don't know if you can create another repo from another repo. I'm not sure. I mean, you could run it on a cron on, say, a small VM. I don't know why you'd want to do that. That seems like creating a lot of repos, and it's not something we do that often. So I'd be interested to know a bit more about your use case, and then maybe I can help. Abhinav asks, how to become a DevOps first DevRel? How many years do you think is enough working in DevOps? DevOps engineer before diving full-time into DevRel? Well, everyone's different. I see people doing it after a few months, some people it takes many years. It really depends. I think start doing it from now, right? Start creating content, start learning in public, start networking with people, and you're gonna get your role, your dream role, much sooner. But if you're doing everything in private and you're not, joining events virtually or in person and you're not creating content, then you're not gonna stand out from the crowd. It makes it a lot more difficult and then people will want more experience. So if you can show them how awesome you are sooner, consistently, right? They don't wanna see how awesome you've been in the last week. They want to see how awesome you've been in the last few months, if not a year. So do it consistently, and then trust me, doors will open for you. I always say to people, if you want to accelerate career and you get the job that you want, then you need to do open source and you need to do content creation. You don't have to become a content creator, but you need to learn in public. And I think that's really, really important. So open source and content creation, learning in public, all kind of join together beautifully. So once you start one, the other will kind of fall into place. I recommend starting with open source because then it will give you content ideas. As you learn something, share a tip. As you get stuck, share it and how you fixed it. Like, what are you working at the moment? Learning, what open source projects are you doing? Collaborating with people. Give someone a shout out. That's all content. And that's really, really important because then you kind of get the best of both worlds. Mohammed asks, who did the accessibility test for Linkfree? So Emma Dawson did them for her YouTube channel and a video, and we did a lot of improvements from there. And then the actual automation was done by Dan, I think, and he added that to our Playwright tests. And so now we always get the accessibility tests running on a GitHub action, which is super, super awesome. So I hope that helps. Go and chat to both of them in the EdiHub Discord. They're super friendly and super helpful. Warren asks, how do you automate open source development? What is your workflow? I'm not quite sure of your question here. So I use a lot of GitHub actions. You can see that in the Linkfree project. We create the releases, we create the Docker containers, we run automated tests, linters, Prettier. We run all those on automation. But in terms of other workflows, we deploy with it as well. We give the user feedback, a welcome message, so many other things going on. But maybe if you can specify exactly what you're thinking about, then I can help more. Come and chat to us in the EdiHub Discord. Kuno asks, share an anecdote of someone getting opportunities from open source. Wow, there's so many. I've got interviews with them on my YouTube channel. Go check it out. But off the top of my head, there was Confidence from Nigeria. He got his first DevRel open source role as a student. He was doing it for fun, for learning in public, and they offered him a job. And he said, well, I'm a student. He said, well, work for us as much as you can, and when you finish studying, then also the full-time job is waiting for you. There are just so many amazing stories. You need to get into open source, everyone. I can't recommend that enough. Adrian asks, if you had to give someone one advice to someone transitioning from a non-technical field to programming, what would it be? I just said it a few times, but I'm going to say it again because it's so important. Open source. Get involved in open source, join the community. You don't have to be even a coder to get involved in open source. You can do translations. My amazing video editor, Alona, has translated some of our documentation, and it's just been amazing. There's just so many ways. You could triage issues. You could give feedback on pull requests, and feedback could be asking questions. So there's just so many ways to get involved. And if you're transitioning into tech, you can bring some value from your previous experience that people who code don't have that experience. So I think that's super important. And when these amazing people from different backgrounds and perspectives come together, that's when all the magic happens. And that's when the project goes from good to great. So get involved. Let me know which projects you want to get involved in. You can always join us in EdiHub and our Linkfree project, or other projects if you prefer. Sam asks, can you share some advice on aspiring software developers who want to build their skills and make a positive impact in their communities? I think chatting to people, I think in communities, some people just watch all the time, and people aren't going to know you're there. So I think it's important to get involved in the discussion. You could ask a question. There are just so many ways. It's not just listening to somebody else with their problem and just asking questions. They usually figure out the problem themselves, and they're super grateful to you. I see that happening all the time at EdiHub, and I just think that's amazing. Get involved, put yourself out there. It's scary, but everyone wants you to succeed. Fishwood asks, how to level up your contribution level from good first issue to good level issues. Well, there are different types of good first issues. There are ones that are fixing a typo, there are ones that are maybe adding some documentation, and then there are ones doing some code changes. So you can definitely level up through good first issues, but then don't get stuck on those. You really want to go to the next level after that. And the way we achieve this in the EdiHub Linkfree project is we have points. And you don't know what 1 point is, you don't know what 3 point is, but you know that 3 points is 3 times 1 point. That makes sense. So if you see a good first issue with 1 point, it's going to be really straightforward. If you see a good first issue with 2 points, because you know it's going to be a bit more work, maybe twice as much effort or work as the other one. And then when you see another issue that isn't a good first issue, has 3 or 5 points, you can kind of gauge how hard it is. And you can always ask the question and say, look, I've got this experience, do you think I can do it? And someone might want to pair with you on it, and pairing is just so important because you both get to learn from each other, even if you're at different levels. The person who's newer to tech is going to ask questions that's going to really spark lots of ideas, and the person who is been in tech a while and might have kind of missed certain things out that's happening at the moment because there is just so much going on in tech, it's hard to keep up with everything. Our man asks, if you could start over, what would you do differently? I actually made a video on this about a year ago, but just to give you the highlights right now, what I'd do differently is I would start open source from day one, even before I've started doing Hello World in code. And number 2, I would start learning in public and creating content sooner. I'm not talking about YouTube videos, live streams, or anything really big and complicated, but just getting on Twitter, sharing some tips. And if you can do videos, great. If you can write blog posts, great. Whatever it is, just put it out there. It's going to help you in the long run because let me tell you something, it's a marathon, not a sprint being in tech. Here's a question from Sri Krish. Hopefully I pronounced that okay. When you come across an issue and it's fairly complex, how do you develop that level of confidence and mindset to work on, even though you have not contributed to that code before? Well, to be honest, if you're going to a project for the first time, don't try and pick a really difficult issue because you're going to get kind of less help from the maintainers because you've just turned out of nowhere. I would try and pick some, not necessarily good first issues, but easier issues that you can do and you can then add value to the project, the maintainers and the community. And the great thing about that is when you want to do something more challenging, the maintainers and the community are going to help you more because they know you're going to stick around and you're going to help other people, and as you learn new things, you're going to help other people and so forth. So I think that's really important. Remember, everyone's time is precious. Suvik asks, how to gather more audience in open source to contribute to my project? Well, I did say earlier on how open source and content creation have a massive overlap. Well, this is the place to do it. If you've learned something on your project or done something really cool, like some cool automation or whatever it is, then you could tweet about it. You could write a blog post about it, how you did it. Even if you got stuck and how you fixed it. That's really good information and valuable to other people. And I think that's a really important way to get people aware of your project in a non-salesy way. No one wants to see a tweet or see a blog post, start my project, contribute to my project. Why? What's your project about? What cool things are you doing on the project that other people might be interested in? You want to spark their interest. So I would share more behind the scenes, as it were, of your open source project. And then in the reply to your tweet or in your blog post or in YouTube video, have a link to the repo so people can go check it out. Tamal asks, isn't building communities, open source, client work sometimes hectic? Yes, it is. We're doing it for a while, but sometimes I feel like running away from everything. It happens, but I think that kind of on the way to burnout. I think it's important to take breaks and make sure you set boundaries. Everyone's in different time zones, but when it's time for you to stop for the day, you stop for the day. Unless it's absolutely urgent, don't work all day and all night because it will just keep happening, repeating all the time. And sometimes you have those days where you're not very productive, and that's fine. Take a break. Make sure you do take a break. The little ones and often, and then the bigger ones like maybe on the weekend. A lot of us do geek out on the weekend, but make sure it's not too much. It's not as intense as it is during the week. Aridam asks, what is the biggest challenge for open source projects facing today? Well, to be honest, I think it is funding. I think there's so many great projects out there that are open source and so many amazing maintainers, but unfortunately, they're doing this after work, after the family's gone to sleep or before the family wakes up and so on. And so I think it isn't really sustainable and leads to burnout. So these companies that are making billions need to really contribute to open source projects financially, not technically. And so therefore the maintainers who give up, 40, 50, 60 hours a week, even the ones who give up 5 hours, right? It's about adding value, not time. But I'm going to kind of one extreme to make a point here. I think it's really important these companies do, put their hand in their pocket and help these amazing people. Imran asks, how to manage contributions, multiple works simultaneously, and consistently post on Twitter. Well, to be honest, I try and link all three together. So my client work is usually about open source. So I get to contribute, I get to get involved in that. And my content's about open source. So if I've learned something or I've done something or I've had a call with someone, I'm gonna share it on socials and a bit behind the scenes. So to me, I don't feel like I'm creating content, I feel like I'm documenting my journey and taking you all along for the ride, and hopefully it helps you and you all can learn from it as well. So make it easier, make your kind of journey and your content work harder for you so you don't have to. Yug asks, Give me some tips to accelerate in open source and programming world. Well, to accelerate in programming world, I would say get into open source, and to accelerate in open source, I would say join a community. Go chat to people. The more time you can geek out with people, I'm not talking about chat about the TV series or memes. I mean, valuable chatting, valuable collaboration is really, really important. Can you help them? Can they help you? Can you work together on an issue? What projects do they work on? Just to be aware of stuff, and then just getting involved in the conversation, supporting each other. Even just moral support is really helpful. When someone says, oh, I can't do this issue, I can't do this pull request. Yes, you can. Give it a go. We're here to help. That is a way to support someone else, and then they'll support you. And it's what it's all about in the community. So I say, get involved, put yourself out there. Krishna, similar reply to you, how to make connections or build relationships with people in tech. Get involved in the conversation. I just can't emphasize that enough. People think they join a community and that's it. It's like buying a course to learn something and never watching it or never taking the course. You're not just going to magically kind of understand it all. You've got to do the course. You can't get gym membership, join a gym, and never go. You're not going to get fit and healthy and, stacked, or however you want to call it. So it's important that you get involved. Devesh asks, as a beginner, how to contribute to open source projects. There are instances where the code base is hard to understand and scared to change and project not running locally. I think it is important to get the project running locally or in a cloud IDE or whatever it is. But it's important to get it running so you can check that your changes work. And you don't need to understand the whole code base. You can learn what you need to as you go along. You're never going to understand the whole code base. And by the time you did, it would all change because it's changing all the time. So I would say just look at the little bit you need to do, the component, the module, whatever it is, and then make improvements, add value, and you'll learn a lot more as you go along. I hope you enjoyed this video. I really enjoyed your questions. Thank you so much for putting it out there in public. I know sometimes it's hard and scary, but trust me, it benefits you and me. And I'm not really a big fan of DMs anyway. Let's geek out between videos and live streams. Eddie Hub Discord, link in the description below. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already.